welcome to the Most Excellent 80s Movies podcast. It's the podcast where we solve the mystery of the 80s movies we think we love or might have missed with these, our grown up eyes, to see how they hold up in the year 2023. Today we're talking about Young Sherlock Holmes, a movie selection from 1985, about which Letterboxd says, before a lifetime of adventure, they lived the adventure of a lifetime. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson meet as boys in an English boarding school. Holmes is known for his deductive ability even as a youth, amazing his classmates with his abilities. When they discover a plot to murder a series of British businessmen by an Egyptian cult, they move to stop it. That's quite a description. I'm Krissy Lenz, the director of the Neighborhood Comedy Theater in downtown Mesa, Arizona, and here with me today is...
Nathan Blackwell, independent filmmaker, and that is the end of my description.
Yes, award-winning independent filmmaker, Nathan Blackwell. Young Sherlock Holmes, this is your pick.
Well, yeah, I was thinking of wanting to do another one of these Steven Spielberg produced 80s movies.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole swath of them, Back to the Future, Gremlins, Poltergeist, Goonies, and this one, Young Sherlock Holmes, which didn't pop as much as the others in mainstream, was one of those as well.
Yeah.
And so it's I remember it fondly as a kid. I've always been a fan of Sherlock Holmes, and yeah, it's it has a fun little vibe about it, but also an important thing, just in terms of like film history. This has the first full CGI character in a movie. I'm sure that's not 100% accurate, but it's basically the agreed upon thing. And it's done like when we think of like early CGI, we think about like Lawnmower Man and things like that. Like it really does not hold up.
Right.
But like early CGI like this, and like Star Trek The Wrath of Khan and Tron, like this versus all of them holds up flawlessly.
I could see. I've never seen this before. It was my first time seeing it. I never heard of this before. So I kept calling it Young Indiana Jones.
But yeah, it has a certain vibe of that as well. It has a certain Indiana Jones feel to it. And
it does.
And this movie is not made by, this movie is made so we're like the connective tissue of these other movies is like, Chris Columbus, he did Gremlins and Goonies. He also wrote this movie. And then it's directed by Barry Levinson, who's no slouch. He did The Natural, and then later we'll do Rain Man. Yeah, but this was his dip into kind of like the Spielberg-esque adventure movies, And once we get into it, I'd love to talk about, so what is the connective tissue other than the people of like these quote Steven Spielberg presents style movies, especially in the 80s. But yeah, I would not call this, like, if I made a top 100 movies of all time, this would not be on the list, but I remember it being a fun adventure, kind of in the vein of like The Rocketeer.
Sure. Yeah, it has very Rocketeer vibe, and I could see, if I had seen this as a kid, really loving it.
Yeah, it's got a retro joie de vivre adventure, an unjaded kind of swashbuckling adventure of like young people, and it's kind of pulpy too,
Yeah.
Just like The Rocketeer. Like, this is like, oh, we've got to stop the cultists who have created their own, pyramid and doing Temple of Doom sacrifices and poison darts and things like that.
Yeah, and also it has like a cozy mystery vibe. I like my cozy
Hmm.
mysteries with like retired people, but it's just as fun with kids, turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that is solid right up uh my alley comfort food of just like these
Yeah.
these the British murder mysteries where it's like,
Mhm.
Tracker, John Tracker is a detective who's now saddled with a partner who's a woman of
Mhm.
all things, and now they
Ew.
they have to investigate a murder, three murders every week in this small village of 3,000 people,
Yep,
you know.
I love it. I love Father Brown. I love Sister Boniface. I love
Mhm.
all those murder mystery shows where it's like, how does someone die in your village every week and you
Mhm.
still feel
Yep.
like you're safe there?
The worst is it's like is that show Grantchester, where he's like the attractive priest who likes jazz but yet helps the main constable solve murders, and it's such a
Yep.
small town that someone did like a statistic that it is the most dangerous town in the entire world because of how many
Yeah.
murders a year are going on.
Don't do anything nefarious in that town. You will get murdered for it.
Hmm.
So we start this one with, I guess, a murder. There's a gentleman with like gigantic mutton chops roaming the streets of London, I guess. He gets shot with a little dart and then hallucinates that his dinner is trying to kill him. And what was that effect of the he's like eating a pheasant for dinner and he like hallucinates that it comes to life and is
Hmm.
attacking him. Was that like claymation?
I think I think there's a lot of stop animation um
Yeah.
in here. And then a lot of practical effects as well. Like
Mhm.
my favorite hallucination is the John Watson's when he's imagining all the food that wants to be eaten.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's so cute
That was
because you
very
can see
cute.
it's real stuff,
Yeah.
that they're
It's
real.
so this one looks really real. It looks like a Skeksis is trying to attack him.
Yeah.
There's a really funny moment where we come out of the hallucination and you see all the people in the restaurant just seeing this guy swatting at the air.
Mhm.
He runs away from his dinner, runs to his home where he hallucinates that his coat rack is attacking him and that his whole house is on fire. So he throws himself out the window and dies.
Yeah.
Cut to, we get to meet Sherlock Holmes. Young John Watson is starting at a new school, and his roommate is Sherlock Holmes, who does all his like deducing and as by way of introduction. And then we just get a long time of like meeting this like Hogwarts type school where there's like a Draco Malfoy kid who's mean, and Sherlock is sort of the impressive but annoying kid. There's a girl there, one girl
Right, in a
who's
boys' boarding school.
and she's in love with Sherlock Holmes, and her uncle is a crazy old professor who still lives there and is building a flying machine, which is similar to like Da Vinci.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're being stalked by a mysterious old man. They do a bunch of fencing, which is where we meet the young, um, what would you call him? The young teacher, Mr. Wraith, Professor
Yes,
Wraith.
he is seen as Sherlock's kind of mentor father figure,
Yeah,
you
they
know?
fence together,
Right.
and
He's the only one who Sherlock is the only one who seems to meet his high standards, you know?
yes. Although Sherlock lets his emotions get in the way of his fencing.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And the arc on this, so it's like Sherlock, there's so many variations and versions of what we've seen now of Sherlock Holmes, especially with like the most recent like Cumberbatch and Robert Downey
Mhm.
Jr. versions. Like those are the wildest kind of
Mhm.
pitches. Um, but like Sherlock is always kind of accused by the people in his life as being extremely cold and calculating and not emotional. And
Right.
that's how the fictional character is. And so what they wanted in this story is to kind of show him much more emotional and to see the events that made him kind of shut down a bit.
Yes, and I like that as an origin story. Although they're very careful at the beginning and at the end to have little disclaimers that say this is not
Uh-huh.
written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. It's inspired by Sir
Well,
Arthur
I
Conan Doyle.
I think there's the legal trouble that even like did you ever see the Ian McKellen movie Mr. Holmes that came out like 10 years ago?
No.
So they even had the same legal things where it's the character is now public domain, but the stories are not.
Right.
So that was probably definitely the case then 30 years ago. And so they probably for very legal specific reasons had to kind of put that up front.
Yeah. This is not a Sherlock Holmes story. This is our Sherlock Holmes story. No one from the Arthur Conan Doyle estate approved this. I just love that they're like, we just made this
Mhm.
up, you guys."
I also feel like they also wanted like they were also kind of like I felt like they went a little further and they're also wanting to not offend people who genuinely love the character. Like
Right.
they don't want to piss off Sherlock Holmes fans.
Right. They want to endear themselves to the Sherlock Holmes fans and be like, this is his origin story, you
Mhm.
silly gooses.
Yeah.
Um, I do like that at the beginning when they're like, "What is your wish for the future, Holmes?" And he's like, "I wish to never be alone." And at the end, he's like,
Oh.
"I shall always be alone."
Oh.
Because they fridge his girl.
Yep. Oh my gosh.
And she's just a baby. They're like little kids. It's nuts how
Mhm.
much murder there is of little kids in this movie.
Mhm.
They just are murdering them left, right, and sideways. So we get a cheating. Well, first there's a fun little game where Sherlock has to find a trophy that's been hidden
Right.
and use his deductive reasoning skills to find a trophy, which
Yes.
is a fun little diversion. But then there is a cheating scandal. The Draco Malfoy of their school uh, frames Sherlock for cheating. And the teacher, who's like the Severus Snape of this movie, wants to believe it because he just can't believe that Sherlock is as smart as he is.
Mhm.
And is like, well, that's how you've been doing it all this time. The mystery is solved. You're expelled. And they kick Sherlock out of their school. Meanwhile, the old man who is building the flying machine, who's sort of like also like a mentor,
So then, okay, so in Harry Potter things, who's his main mentor? The fencing teacher and the main guy. That's not the Snape.
he's like
That's
the
the
Lupin.
yeah. He's the Lupin.
And then I would say this guy is maybe like the Hagrid or something because he's sort of
Yes,
a
he's kind of the ground.
buffoon.
He's kind of the groundskeeper, right? He's
Yeah.
the dad of the girl Elizabeth.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, that's the only way she's on campus on this boys' boarding school is that she's the daughter of like the groundskeeper or whatever his.
I
I'm
think
sure
there's
his
like the
job is.
niece.
Yeah,
So he gets shot with one of the poison darts.
yeah, and we really like him at this point. So this is the first time it's not. We've already seen like two strangers get this, and
Mhm.
so now we're like, oh shit,
Get someone we
stakes.
care about.
Mm-hmm.
He goes. This is the part where we get the CGI knight because he's like, "I've been shot with a dart. I'm going to go antiquing."
No, the CGI characters with the priest.
Oh, the priest, the priest, the priest. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. I completely skipped the priest.
yeah. So the CGI character, which I think is like on screen for like 7 seconds, took
Mhm.
them 4 months to do.
Mhm.
Um,
And it was done by John Lasseter and the Pixar people, right?
I think so because they were actually part of ILM and Lucasfilm
Mhm.
before they were basically. It's like I don't know, we'll sell off Pixar.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so the effect is basically a stained glass knight jumping out of the window and coming alive. And the reason why it works so well is because it's effectively two-dimensional.
Mhm.
It's like a two-dimensional guy walking towards him. And it's technically not two-dimensional, since it's glass. It's got some thickness as we actually see it
Mhm.
walk by us. But because it's something, material like that and semi-translucent, that it really still works.
Yeah.
um
Cuz it's not realistic.
Correct. And it's a type of surface that is much easier. Like, we have the uncanny valley because our brains are so trained to detect human faces and what is right
Right.
and what isn't right. Like, we look at a
Mhm.
human face and we do a million sort of like processes to look at it, you know, as we're judging it and analyzing it. And so it's so easy for a CGI human face to look weird to us, you know.
Yeah. Too smooth, too smooth.
Mhm.
Put some bumps in there.
So if we were sentient glass, then it's very likely that this effect would not hold up at all. But yeah, it's a really fun one. These like poison dart nightmares give them a lot of leeway to kind of do more fantastic, quote, Spielberg-esque sort of fantasy.
Yeah, fun. It adds fun to the movie even though it like results in
Mhm.
people being murdered. It adds these little moments of adventure and fun.
Yeah, it's like Sherlock Holmes doesn't really have a lot of action. Like, maybe there's a chase and then someone gets stabbed.
Mhm.
And so, but that's fine. It's all about the deduction and the mystery. But you get to have, with this device, you get to have some fantastic adventure.
Yeah. And yeah, so I totally skipped over the priest, but we're with the beloved old Hagrid at this point,
Hmm.
who is at an antique store and he's hallucinating that dragons are crawling all over him. So, in an attempt to stab these really cute little dragons, which he should just make friends with, he stabs himself in the chest.
Hmm. That was his first
And
mistake.
that was his first and last mistake. I do have to say, as a tool of murder, making people hallucinate themselves to death seems really iffy.
Yes, it obviously doesn't work on everyone. The
Right.
Inspector Lestrade, um, he he got it off screen and survived.
Yeah.
I had to have like three other constables hold me down from hanging myself. It's like, gosh, that's oddly specific.
It sure is.
Yeah.
And it's like if it doesn't necessarily because like Watson's hallucination when they all three get shot. What the our Harry, Ron, and Hermione of this
Hmm.
movie all get
Yeah,
shot with the blow darts, and the two of them have terrifying.
they really do fit all the archetypes of Harry Potter, don't they?
They sure do. They have like the Elizabeth character hallucinates that she's being sucked down into a grave.
Hmm.
Sherlock hallucinates a bad memory of like breaking his parents up somehow. And Watson just hallucinates that a lot of desserts want to climb into his face.
Yeah. He has not accrued a lot of trauma at this point to pull from.
No, no. So if you're pure of heart, then these little darts can't get you.
Yeah.
So they do find clues though. The dying declaration of their friend is Etar. And they find the little blowgun.
Hmm.
They investigate the blowgun and they immediately find the Rami 10, which is an Egyptian cult, a murder cult that lives in a giant pyramid that they just stumble upon.
Yes.
They fall through the pyramid and they're immediately in like a Temple of Doom style. There's hundreds of people down there. They're all dressed in like their cult finery. They've got like shaved heads and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This is like a full-blown deal.
Yeah, it's and we later learned that it's I would not say that it's so all of the cultists who are practicing this Egyptian thing, this Egyptian sacrifice are white.
Yep.
But we learned that it was the one guy, the main bad guy, who recruited like drug addicts and homeless to be his. Basically, he gave them something to believe in, and so they've all doubled down into this cult.
And they explain that the Itar, the bad guy, he and his sister were half white, half Egyptian,
Yeah.
Anglo-Egyptian,
Mm-hmm.
although they don't seem Egyptian. There's no like actual Egyptians in this movie. So they find this cult, and what the cult is doing is mummifying young girls and covering them in wax,
Mm-hmm.
which is brutal.
Yeah, that's intense.
And it's so intense that when Sherlock is observing this, he stands up and goes, "Stop it! She's still alive." We never find out what happened to that girl. We don't think that Sherlock saved her, right? Or do we
Yeah,
think
no,
that Sherlock saved her?
I don't. I things did not work. I none of the ladies met good ends in this film.
Nope. They all get fridged.
Yeah.
So they run and run and run, and that's when they get hit by darts and have their fun hallucinations,
Mm-hmm.
which were especially the one Elizabeth has, which was pretty scary, and the
Mm-hmm.
one Watson has is pretty cute.
Yeah.
They have a little sword fight
Mm-hmm.
while hallucinating.
But yeah, it's especially like Elizabeth's. Like it goes like there. It just reminded me that there was especially in these like Spielberg style movies. It's like you talk about like what are the the kind of like common threads of these Steven Spielberg produced movies.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think one of the elements that I think would surprise many people is that there's a lot of horror
Yeah.
in them. And and scenes like this remind me like kids movies, and we're talking like these kind of kids movies, not like sing along like Frozen kids movies.
Not like The Little Mermaid.
This is more like 13-year-olds, like
Yeah. Yeah,
movies
yeah,
for
yeah.
13-year-olds. There was a lot more horror in the 80s.
Well,
A
you
lot.
think about Goonies and Gremlins as like
Hmm.
examples. There's like a lot of like skeletons and scary moments and near death experiences
Yeah,
in
jump scares
both.
and things that probably gave like 8-year-olds who saw it nightmares,
Oh yeah, I can speak from experience. The gross out nightmares,
Mhm, mhm.
especially Gremlins. Like Gremlins is really
Oh,
gross.
yeah, 100%, like, microwaving the gremlin, the mom microwaving the
Mhm.
gremlin.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. But, yeah, so is now a good time to talk about, like, the whole, like, the connective tissue of the Spielberg-produced films, you know?
I think so cuz we're almost to the end of the movie.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of so what are some of these movies? So these are there's definitely like animated ones like Five Goes West and things like that, but the real ones that I think of are like the Goonies, Poltergeist, Gremlins, Back to the Future,
Mhm.
Young Sherlock Holmes, and I think Battery is not included.
Mhm.
But yeah, there's a bunch more, but I feel like the thread of these is is obviously some of Steven Spielberg's own sensibilities, of what he likes, that he
Right.
but some of these movies he didn't originate. He didn't direct. He didn't direct any of these, but he kind of lends his name to it, and like the music feels John Williamsy
Yeah, it
on all
really
of these.
does. It
Yeah,
almost sounds Indiana Jones-ish,
yeah.
which
Um,
didn't help my confusion.
and they and so the only reason it's like the reason why I'm kind of making a specific point is that they actually advertise these movies. A Steven Spielberg presents this. So this was these kind of movies were directly on the nose, like under an umbrella of kind of a running theme of like Spielberg himself is involved somehow, you
Right.
know? And
You're
so
getting
like
a Spielbergian experience.
yeah, and so that means it's kind of aimed towards that 13-year-old, who
Right.
wants to see adventure, who wants to see a little bit of jump scare and horror. There's
Mhm.
visual effects, and these movies are primarily an adventure.
Right. They're a rip-roaring,
Hmm.
scary good time.
But yeah, one of one of the most like common collaborators in these kind of Spielberg-esque movies is Chris Columbus. You
Yeah.
know, 'Cause-
Who also directed the first Harry Potter. I just
yes.
wanna toss that out there.
All right, let's continue.
Okay. So they have their hallucination. They go to Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard won't listen, but he accidentally pokes himself with the little dart that
Hmm.
they give him, which is like, you idiot. They just said this poison dart causes deadly hallucinations, and you poked yourself in the fingy with it? Come on. They go to the school to let their beloved teacher Wraith know what's going on. And he's with the school nurse who's like, oh, okay, well, let's expel all of you and kill this dog.
Hmm.
She has a little pet dog. And we're immediately like, okay, this is not good. They rip the wig off the
Oh
school
yeah.
nurse.
Hmm.
Turns out she's bald cultist.
Hmm.
And Wraith is Etar backwards. He's the bad guy, you
Yeah, you
guys.
guys.
Turns out he was Professor Snape all along.
Uh-huh. Or who's the professor in the Sorcerer's Stone?
Oh, he's the Quirrell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they gotta so they run away. They
Lupin
escape.
turns into Quirrell. Yeah.
Yep. And the game is afoot. There's a lot of smooching though. Were you surprised at how much smooching there is between Sherlock and the
Hmm.
Harry and Hermione
Hmm.
characters
Yeah. Uh-huh.
for
But
teenagers?
yeah. But I think that was also part of them wanting to show the things that he had when he was young, that because it's not that Sherlock is like celibate, you know.
Yeah, it's just that he one time lost his love.
Exactly. And that he sees it as, well, I guess you could say that he's celibate. He sees romance and in general human connection as a distraction.
And a danger.
Yeah, and a danger. Um
But not when he was this age. At this age, he was smooching it up, you guys.
mhm. Mhm.
Smooch, smoochy, smoochy, smooch, smooch, smooch. Which I think, like, I watched this with my 12-year-old, and he like totally got bored and pieced out. It was a smooching was not for him. So they finally unravel the mystery, which is that these 5 old men who have been killed were in Egypt trying to make their fortune, and they like raided and destroyed the tomb of 5 Egyptian princesses.
Mhm. Yeah.
So and because the British army got so mad that the villagers got mad, they killed a whole village full of people.
Mhm.
This is fucking brutal.
Yeah. And this is a very like Sherlock Holmes style plot where it's like a secret like cabal of men 20 years ago. They thought they got away from it, and now it's kind of one member is returning to kind of kill them all.
Yeah. But like they have a right to be pissed. These guys they started a military uprising that killed your entire village. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of on your side a little bit. I'm upset that you're mummifying innocent young girls, but like
Yeah. Uh-huh. I feel like you've taken
maybe
that part a little too far,
yeah,
you know?
but perhaps there was a solution that we could have found if we went a
Mm-hmm.
little less crazy to get some justice.
Mm-hmm.
So the nurse and the teacher are fully bad guys at this point, and they hypnotize Elizabeth to try and tell them where Sherlock and Watson are. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but by this time, they've all figured it out, and they go to save Elizabeth in the flying machine,
Right. Which
which
is
reminds me of the part in Harry Potter 5 where they steal the Thestrals and go flying.
right. Or yeah, or the flying car. Because
Or
this
the
flying
flying
machine is
car,
basically
yeah.
like a car. I was thinking about it. It's this flying machine never. It always starts off from somewhere high, and it
Right.
basically then launches, and it's effectively a heavy glider. It's
Yeah.
like it can't like take off from the ground at all.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's got bicycle pedals that you pedal
Hmm.
and it flaps the wings.
Yes.
So it's just falling with style.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Controlled descent.
long-term falling.
Yeah.
But it gets the job done. They make it back to the pyramid. They know where the pyramid is.
Hmm.
So they just hustle their way back there where Elizabeth is in the process of being mummified.
Yeah.
They concoct an elaborate geom and they conduct an elaborate geometry uh trap which collapses
Classic.
the roof
Uh huh. Yeah.
and
It's like
drops the chandelier.
yeah. He said like it was like if my geometry is correct, one of these beams goes out and this whole place comes down. It's like isn't like a pyramid like the most structurally strong geometrical shape?
This was a revenge pyramid,
Oh, right.
not a long-lasting pyramid. It was built by the drug addicts and the homeless people that they
Hmm.
recruited and shaved their heads and stuff. So that's why it's
Right. It's
not
non-OSHA. It's
geometrically
non-OSHA.
sound.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we have a whole big fight. The kid crew gets away, but lo and behold, Elizabeth gets fucking shot in the stomach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shot in the stomach. And while she lay dying, Holmes is like, I gotta go kill this guy in a sword fight,
Uh-huh.
which he does. Wraith falls through the ice in a fun like slow death sink into ice. They in their sword fight, he's like, "You're always so emotional, Holmes. You're the love of your life lays dying in the street and you're here chasing me." And it's like, "Yep, that's what he did." He goes back to Elizabeth while she's like having her dying breath and he's like, "Well, I'll find you in the next life." And she's like, "Sounds good."
Look forward to it.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
She dies. And then we get a nice goodbye scene with Holmes and Watson. They've both been expelled from the school. And it's like, will I ever see you again? Yes, I'm sure. There is a little voiceover, like of an adult Watson who's like, I knew
Mm-hmm.
that someday our paths would cross again. And then we get another disclaimer. This is not a real Sherlock Holmes story. It is not canon. This is not canon, people.
Guys, we're cool, right? We're cool.
We're cool. Our bad, our bad. And then there is a post-credit scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there is a post-credit scene which was not common at all. And the way they tip you off is that they don't just go to credits. We for the long time see just like this horse riding out in the snow,
Mm-hmm.
underneath the credits. And we reveal that the bad guy, Wraith, the teacher, survived. He's now got a hideous scar on his face, and he's assumed a new identity, which is Moriarty. So it's basically laying the groundwork for Sherlock's nemesis.
Yep.
Yeah, and this kind of stuff is done way too much now, but I remember back then it's like, oh, that was a good twist. They added something at the end. That's cool.
That's very cool. But
Yeah.
if I hadn't read that there was a post-credit scene, I would have not watched through the credits all the way.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh
I don't remember. That may have been one of my first post-credit scenes in a movie theater.
oh, so you stayed the whole time and saw it?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
That's
Because I
awesome.
mean, how many movies back then in the 80s had that? Not
Only
many.
Ferris Bueller.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And I don't think I saw that in the theater. I think I saw it on video, but I'm pretty
I
sure.
think someone told me about it, and so I knew
Mm.
it was there.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Mhm. So, on a scale of 1 CGI animated stained
Hmm.
glass night to 10 being the best CGI animated stained glass night, do you rate this really high? Did you love it?
Well, so this movie is comfort food, but it's not the first comfort food that I go for. You know, it's like
Right.
it's kind of in. I would put it just under the Rocketeer in that kind of same category.
Mhm.
Um, I think if I have to be completely like Sherlock Holmes, cold and objective, I would probably give
Woo-hoo.
the movie a 7. You
Okay.
know, I my own a, emotional attachment to it would probably bring it up to like a 7.5 or a 7.8 or something like that. But objectively, it's a lot of fun. You know.
It is a lot of fun. The pacing could be perhaps
Hmm.
scaled up or quickened
Right.
a little bit. I agree with you that I wanted to give this movie a 7, but I bumped it down to a 6.5 because my 12-year-old did not want to watch the end of it. He was like, "I'm gonna go play in my room."
Mm.
So that's why I took a
I'm
half
gonna
a
go
point
chase
down.
dopamine, Mom.
Yep. So that's why I was just like, if it in terms of how it holds up for a kid who like loves adventure movies, loves the
Hmm.
Goonies, it didn't quite make it to 7 territory.
Gotcha.
Okay. So when we talk about deep cut recommendations, I think mine is obvious.
Hmm.
A deep cut recommendation is of course Harry Potter, which is very similar to this, but
Hmm. I would say, you know
specifically,
what, make a double feature of Young Sherlock Holmes and The Worst Witch, with
oh,
Fairuza Balk, and then you go like, oh my god, this is all Harry Potter.
it's all Harry Potter.
But in fairness, I think that the whole boarding school thing has its own archetypes, and
It does.
maybe a lot of us were seeing it for the first time with Harry Potter, but these were for people who have experience with boarding schools, like the British. Um, were a lot more familiar, and it wasn't novel in Harry Potter, so it's not so much of a quote rip off.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to specifically recommend because I talked so much about Harry Potter was the at Universal Studios Hollywood. And they have
Hmm.
one at Universal Studios Orlando too, but the Harry Potter Village has
Yeah.
such a nice cozy feeling.
Yeah, I wouldn't go
Um
in the heat of summer. It kind of takes away some of the fun, but
because it's still all snow capped.
yes.
It's always snow capped. So even if you do go in the deadly heat of the summer, you walk around and you immediately feel like you're in a wintertime cozy village in Harry Potter town in London. And
Hmm.
it's so nice and cozy. And that's how I felt when we got to see the streets of London and see them running around in their cozy little snow capped villages in this movie.
Hmm. Yeah, and apparently there were a lot of scenes where the snow was just totally fake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, obviously not like on giant scenes, but there was a lot of stuff that takes place like in courtyards. They just had to do fake snow.
Fake snow. You gotta love fake snow.
Mm-hmm.
Fake snow in the dead of summer will make you feel a little bit cooler.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your deep cut recommendation?
So my deep cut recommendation, if you want to go further down into Sherlock Holmes, my recommendation is the TV series. It's done. They did several seasons of it, and each season is like a different name. But it's basically it was also kind of during this time, so the 80s to kind of like early 90s, which is the Sherlock Holmes TV series with Jeremy Brett, and
Okay.
so that's to me that is the best. Like I love Benedict Cumberbatch's version of
Me
Sherlock,
too.
but I feel like the Jeremy Brett version of all the ones I've seen is the best Sherlock. Um, uh, one of the things that is, so when I say it's a TV episode, like it's like the British murder mysteries where each episode's an
Mhm.
hour long,
Mhm.
and then each season is only like 5-6 episodes.
Yeah,
Um,
very British.
But yeah, but I mean, there's like 50 of them or something, and it's so comfort food. But the thing that Jeremy Brett brings to it is that he basically plays Sherlock Holmes, which I think is also kind of implied in the versions of Cumberbatch and Robert Downey Jr. is
Mhm.
that Sherlock is manic depressive.
Yeah.
That
He's got
he is energized when he's got a case, that he's singular, and when he doesn't, he is just distraught.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and and Jeremy Brett in particular does a fantastic job of that because he himself was manic depressive.
Oh, I
So
see. So he's
um
bringing in his own experience.
yeah, I feel like if there's like if you met Sherlock Holmes in real life and he was a real person, that Jeremy Brett would be that performance.
Excellent. Well, that is a killer recommendation. I've never heard of that one, so I love knowing about it so I can go watch it now and experience some cozy mystery, which I live
Hmm.
for.
Yeah, I think the first season is called The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
And they eventually do. And then I would say if you want to just like dive into one of them, they also did like movies, which are just
Okay.
like an hour and they're just 90-minute episodes. I would see The Sign of Four.
Okay.
So
So do you have any other anything we missed about young Sherlock Holmes?
just one more bit of fun trivia. So I mentioned that that movie Mr. Holmes with Ian McKellen, which is
Mhm.
a lot of fun. So he basically plays the quote real Sherlock Holmes, and everyone knows about the
Okay.
stories, but so he actually exists as the actual person. And there's some things they got wrong and some things they got right. But he watches this came out like 10 years ago or less than 10 years ago, but he watches a movie of his life in the theater, and it's played by young Sherlock Holmes, the same actor who played young Sherlock Holmes, and this is 20 years later.
Oh, wow,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, so there must have been some love in that,
Yeah, for
for them to
sure.
do that because it really is an Easter egg. They would have had to go. That actor is still a working actor, but I don't think he does anything like big or stars in anything.
Mhm.
So for them to pull him in, that's was a lot of fun to spot.
Yeah, I bet he loved that.
Yeah,
And I bet for people who spotted him and knew of the movie, it was like, "Oh my god, it's young Sherlock."
I that was me.
Yeah, I love it. That's so funny. Well, what a great fact. Um Excellent. So stay tuned everyone if you are a member or if you would like to become a member through True Story FM and support the podcast. There's more content with Nathan and Krissy having a fun summer movie conversation after the credits. Become a member, follow us on True Story FM. And if you're not ready to fully become a member yet, just follow us on the social media. You can find us at Most Excellent Pod. You can leave a rating or a review or anything like that, which really helps us out wherever you're listening to this podcast. We appreciate it so much. Um, and thank you for listening. Where can people find your films, Nathan, and support you in your endeavors?
Yeah, the best place is squishystudios.com. If you want to check out our more info on our feature film, you can go there. But the last movie ever made, which is the feature that's going around festivals right now, is also on Instagram and Facebook.
Excellent.
Technically on Twitter as well, but I don't really tweet.
Yeah, I don't really have a Twitter anymore. You can find me at the neighborhood comedy theater, The Place in downtown Mesa, Arizona. Or you can find me online at Most Excellent Krissy on the Instagrams. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you so much. And while you're out there in the world, please keep the most excellent 80s movies motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and
Party
party on,
on, dudes.
dudes. I think that was our best party on dudes ever.
Was it?
I think so.